Part 1. The Invisible Ocean. Think about the last time you lost your head. Maybe you snapped at someone you love over something trivial. Maybe you found yourself paralyzed by a fear you couldn't name. Or maybe, just for a second, you had a thought so strange, so out of character, that you looked around as if someone else had whispered it into your ear. In those moments, we usually say, "I wasn't myself." But Carl Jung will look at you with a calm, knowing smile and ask, if you weren't yourself, then who were you? Welcome to Part 1. For the last century, we have lived in the age of the rational man. We've been told that we are the masters of our own houses. We believe that our I, the ego, the person who chooses what to have for breakfast and how to answer an email, is the one running the show. We like to think of our minds as a well-lit office where every file is labeled and every drawer is locked. But Jungian psychology suggests a much more haunting reality. Your conscious mind, that well-lit office, is actually just a tiny, fragile attic in a massive, ancient mansion. And beneath the floorboards of that attic lies a structure so deep and so vast that it stretches back to the beginning of time. Jung called this the unconscious, but I want you to think of it as the invisible ocean. You are a small boat on that ocean. Most of the time, the water is calm. You feel in control of the rudder. You think you know where you're going, but every now and then, a massive wave rises from the depths. A current pulls you miles off course. A leviathan brushes against the hull. You can try to ignore the ocean. You can pretend the boat is all there is. But the ocean doesn't care if you believe in it. It is the thing that moves you. In this masterclass, we are going to learn how to navigate. We aren't going to tame the sea. No one tames the sea. But we are going to learn its language. We are going to learn how to read the stars and the currents so that we stop being lived by our subconscious and start living with it. Because here is the truth that modern science often forgets. Your unconscious is not a trash bin for repressed memories. It is not just a dark place where you hide your secrets. It is the source of your creativity. It is the wellspring of your intuition. It is the inner compass that knows exactly who you are meant to become, even when your rational mind is completely lost. So why are we so afraid of it? We are afraid because the unconscious is irrational. It doesn't speak in English. It doesn't care about your 5-year plan or your social status. It speaks in symbols. It speaks in moods. It speaks in the strange, vivid theater of your dreams. And in our modern world, we have been trained to ignore anything we can't measure with a ruler or explain with a spreadsheet. We have demytholized the world. We look at a forest and see lumber. We look at the stars and see burning gas. We look at our own souls and see chemical imbalances. Jung believed that this scientific rationalism has left us profoundly lonely. We have lost our connection to the big story. We have cut ourselves off from the ancient symbols that once gave human life meaning. And when you cut yourself off from the ocean, you start to wither. You feel a vague sense of emptiness, a midlife crisis, or a depression that no amount of material success can fix. That emptiness is the sound of the ocean calling you back. I want you to look at your life for a moment, not the curated version you show to the world, but the interior version. Have you ever noticed how certain patterns repeat themselves? You keep dating the same kind of person. You keep hitting the same glass ceiling at work. You keep sabotaging yourself just when things are getting good. Your rational mind says that's just bad luck. Jung says, no, that is your unconscious trying to get your attention. It is acting out a drama that you refuse to look at. If you won't face the monster in your dreams, it will show up as a boss at work. If you won't acknowledge the longing in your heart, it will show up as a physical symptom in your body. The ocean will be heard. So how do we begin the dialogue? How do we talk to a part of ourselves that doesn't use words? We start by becoming symbolically aware. Imagine you're walking through a museum of your own life. On the walls are the facts, your degree, your job title, your bank statement. Those are important, but they are dead information. Now imagine there's a hidden room in that museum. In that room, there are no facts. There are only images. There's a recurring dream you've had since you were 7. There's that specific song that makes you cry for reasons you can't explain. There's that gut feeling you had about a stranger that turned out to be exactly right. Those are the symbols. They are the bridge between the boat and the sea. In the sessions to come, we're going to explore the different regions of this map. We're going to talk about the persona, the mask you wear to fit in. We're going to confront the shadow, the part of yourself you've pushed into the basement. We're going to meet the Anima and Animus, the internal forces that drive your attractions and your rages. And eventually, we will find the self, the true center of your being. This journey is what Jung called individuation. It is the process of becoming a whole human, not a perfect human. Jung had no interest in perfection. Perfection is for machines. Humans are meant to be complete, and to be complete, you have to embrace the dark as well as the light. You have to admit that you are much, much bigger than you think you are. I want to leave you with a thought for this first session. There's a story Jung tells about a man who was terrified of a recurring dream where he was being chased by a giant. Every night he would run, and every night the giant would get closer. He was exhausted. He was anxious. He came to Jung for a cure. Jung didn't tell him to take a pill. He didn't tell him to think positive. He told the man, "Tonight, in your dream, stop running. Turn around and ask the giant, 'Why have you come?'" The man did it, and the giant stopped. It didn't attack him. It looked at him and said, "I have been trying to give you this gift for 10 years, but you were too busy running to take it." The giant wasn't an enemy. It was a repressed part of his own strength. What are you running from? What giant is chasing you in your moods, your anxieties, or your secrets? In this series, we are not going to run. We are going to turn around, and we are going to ask the ocean what it wants from us. For your practice today, I want you to start a symbol log. Don't write about your day. Don't write about what you did. Write about what happened to you internally. Did a stranger's face trigger a sudden memory? Did you feel an inexplicable burst of joy looking at a bird? Did you have a slip of the tongue that revealed a hidden truth? Don't analyze it yet, just record it. You are starting to notice the ripples on the surface of the water. In the next session, we're going to look at the most direct way the ocean speaks to us. We're going into the world of dreams. We're going to learn why your brain creates these strange nightly movies and how to decode the telegrams they are sending you. I'll see you in Part 2, the nightly telegram. Part 2, the nightly telegram. You spend a third of your life in a world you cannot explain. Every single night, when you close your eyes and the rational part of you goes to sleep, a curtain rises. A theater begins. You find yourself flying over ancient cities, or being chased through a basement that never ends, or perhaps standing on a stage, realizing you've forgotten your lines. And then you wake up. You rub your eyes, you look at the clock, and you say, "That was just a weird dream." But Carl Jung would stop you right there. He would say, "It wasn't just a dream. It was a telegram, and you just threw it in the trash without reading it." Welcome to Part 2. Today, we are going to learn how to read the mail. In our first session, we talked about the invisible ocean, the vast, unconscious mind that lives beneath your waking life. Today, we look at the most direct way that ocean speaks to the boat. Dreams are not noise. They are not just the brain sorting through the day's trash. To Jung, a dream is a piece of nature. Just like a plant grows or a heart beats, the psyche produces dreams. They are spontaneous, honest, and entirely purposeful. They are trying to tell you something that your conscious mind is too proud, too busy, or too scared to see. Now, the first thing people ask is, if my soul wants to tell me something, why doesn't it just use words? Why all the weird symbols? Why the giant spiders and the missing teeth?
The answer is simple. The unconscious is older than language. Your watchtower, the rational mind, speaks in English, in logic, in math, but the depths of your psyche speak the language of the forest. It speaks in images, in feelings, and in symbols. It's like trying to translate a poem into a tax return. Something is always lost in the translation. So the unconscious doesn't choose to be cryptic. It's simply speaking its native tongue. And if we want to understand our own souls, we have to learn that language. Jung's most important discovery about dreams is the concept of compensation. Imagine your ego, the you that you think you are, is like a king who has become too rigid. Maybe you think you are too perfect. Maybe you are incredibly successful, highly disciplined, and you never show weakness. Your ego is out of balance. The unconscious sees this imbalance. It knows that you are neglecting your humanity, so it sends a dream to compensate. If you are a high-powered CEO who treats everyone like a machine, you might have a dream where you are a small, helpless child lost in a storm. The dream isn't trying to insult you, it's trying to balance the scales. It's saying, look, you are also this. You are also fragile. If you don't acknowledge this part of yourself, you will break. The dream is a self-regulating mechanism. It is trying to make you whole. So how do we decode these telegrams? Most people reach for a dream dictionary. They look up spider, and the book says, a spider means you feel trapped by a woman. Jung hated this. He called it mechanical interpretation. A spider doesn't mean the same thing to a gardener as it does to a person who was bitten by a tarantula as a child. A symbol is a living thing. Its meaning depends entirely on your life and your associations. Here is the Jungian framework for reading your nightly telegrams. It's a 3-step process: association, amplification, and integration. Step 1, association. When you have a dream about a blue house, don't look it up in a book. Ask yourself, what does a blue house mean to me? Does it remind you of your grandmother's home? Does it feel cold and lonely? Does it feel like a sanctuary? The meaning of the symbol is buried in your own history. You are the only person with the key to the code. Step 2, amplification. Sometimes a dream symbol feels bigger than you. It feels ancient. You might dream of a dragon, or a golden crown, or a recurring labyrinth. This is where we look at the collective unconscious. These are symbols that have belonged to humanity for thousands of years. A labyrinth isn't just a maze, it's the journey to the center of the soul. By looking at how myths and legends have used these symbols, we find the flavor of the message. We realize we're not just having a personal dream, we're participating in a human story. And step 3, integration. This is the most important part. Once you understand the message, what are you going to do about it? If the dream tells you that you are neglecting your creative side, you can't just say, oh, that's interesting, and go back to your spreadsheets. You have to give the dream a response. You have to take a physical action in the waking world. Buy a sketchbook. Take a different route to work. Apologize to that friend. When you act on a dream, you tell your unconscious, I heard you. I am listening. And once the unconscious knows it has been heard, the nightmares often stop because the telegram has finally been delivered. I want to share a story from Man and His Symbols. Jung had a patient who was a very successful, highly intellectual man. He was very proper. He had a dream that he was walking through a field and found his father's old boots. They were covered in mud and smelled of the earth. In the dream, he felt an overwhelming urge to put them on. The man was disgusted by the dream. He thought it was low, but Jung saw the compensation. This man lived entirely in his head. He was above the world. The dream was telling him that he needed to get his feet in the mud. He needed to reconnect with the earthy, instinctual, messy part of being human. He was too clean for his own good. A father's boots were a symbol of a grounded life that he had abandoned in his pursuit of intellectual perfection. Once the man accepted this, once he allowed himself to be a little less proper and a little more human, his chronic anxiety vanished. The telegram had been read. I want you to start paying attention to the theater that happens when your eyes are closed. Do not judge your dreams. Do not try to make them logical. They're not supposed to be logical. They're supposed to be felt. If you find yourself waking up with a specific mood, even if you can't remember the dream, stay with that mood for a moment. That mood is the residue of the ocean on your skin. It is telling you the weather of your soul. For your practice today, I want you to do two things. First, put a notebook and a pen next to your bed. Tonight, before you go to bed, tell yourself, I want to remember. I am ready to listen. This simple act of intention changes the way the brain handles the transition from sleep to waking. Second, when you wake up, do not look at your phone. Do not check the news. Stay in that half-light state for 60 seconds. Reach back into the water and try to pull out one fragment, a color, a face, a feeling. Write it down. Even if it makes no sense, you are building a bridge. And once the bridge is built, the wisdom of the ocean can finally reach the boat. In the next part, we are going to talk about the mask we wear in the daytime. We are going to explore the persona. We're going to look at the roles you play, the professional, the perfect partner, the good child, and discover the danger of forgetting who is actually behind the mask. I'll see you in part 3.
Part 3. The social mask. The persona. Think about the way you spoke to your boss this morning. Now think about the way you spoke to your best friend last night. Or the way you act when you are meeting a stranger for the first time. Are they the same person? Probably not. And that's a good thing. If you treated your boss the way you treat your best friend, you'd probably be fired. If you treated a stranger with the raw intimacy of a spouse, you'd be considered unstable. We all have different versions of ourselves that we put on for different occasions. Carl Jung had a name for this. He called it the persona. The word comes from the Latin term for the masks worn by actors in ancient Greek theater. The mask wasn't meant to trick the audience. It was meant to tell them which character was speaking. Welcome to part 3. Today, we're going to look at the social mask you wear every day. We're going to discover why you need it, why it's dangerous, and how to tell if the mask has started to grow into your skin. The persona is a psychological necessity. Imagine if you had to go through life with your soul completely exposed. Imagine if every person you met on the street could see your deepest fears, your secret shames, and your wildest desires. It would be a nightmare. You wouldn't be able to function. The persona is a compromise between you and society. It's a safety buffer. It allows you to play your role, the doctor, the teacher, the parent, the citizen, without losing your core. It is the bridge that connects your inner world to the outer world. But here is where the trouble begins. In our modern high-pressure world, we are rewarded for our personas. We are rewarded for being the always happy friend. We are rewarded for being the stoic leader. We spend so much time polishing the mask, making sure it looks successful, competent, and put together, that we start to believe the mask is who we actually are. Jung warned that the greatest danger a human being faces is identifying with their persona. When you identify with the mask, you become a two-dimensional human being. You lose touch with your own depths. You stop listening to the ocean because you're too busy making sure the boat looks good for the neighbors. Have you ever met someone who is their job? You ask them how they are, and they tell you about their latest promotion. You ask them what they love, and they show you their LinkedIn profile. They don't have hobbies, they have key performance indicators. They don't have feelings, they have key performance indicators. When these people lose their job or they retire, their world collapses. Not just because they lost a paycheck, but because they lost their identity. Without the mask, there is nothing underneath. They are what Jung called a hollow man. Think about the mask you wear most often. Maybe you are the helper. You are the one everyone turns to. You are the strong one. You never complain. You are always there for others. It sounds noble, doesn't it?
But if you only identify as the helper, what happens when you are the one who needs help? What happens to the angry part of you? What happens to the selfish part of you? Because you cannot show those parts through the helper mask, you push them into the basement. You pretend they don't exist. But as we learned in part 1, the ocean doesn't care if you ignore it. The parts of you that don't fit the mask eventually turn into resentment. They turn into exhaustion. They turn into a midlife crisis where you suddenly want to burn your whole life down just to feel something real. Identifying too closely with your persona is like wearing a suit of armor 24 hours a day. It might protect you in a fight, but eventually it becomes heavy. It starts to rust. It makes it impossible to breathe. So how do we unmask without being destroyed? The goal of Jungian work isn't to get rid of the persona. You need a mask to function in the world. The goal is to realize that you are the person wearing the mask. You are the actor, not the character. You should be able to put the mask on when you go to work, and then, critically, you should be able to take it off when you come home. You should be able to look at your professional success and say, "This is something I do, but it is not all that I am." When you realize that the persona is just a tool, you gain a massive amount of freedom. You stop taking things so personally. If someone criticizes your work, they are criticizing the mask, not your soul. If you fail at a task, the character failed, but the actor is still whole. You begin to cultivate an inner life that is independent of your social standing. Jung often spoke about the second half of life. He noted that in the first half of our lives, our job is to build a strong persona. We need to find a career, build a family, and find our place in society. We need the mask to get through the door. But in the second half of life, roughly after the age of 35 or 40, the task changes. The task is to de-identify with the mask. It is the time to go into the basement and find all the parts of ourselves we left behind while we were busy being successful. If you are feeling a sense of boredom or a vague feeling that your life is fake, that is your soul telling you that the mask has become too tight. It's an invitation to go deeper. For your practice today, I want you to perform a mask audit. Think of the 3 main personas you wear, maybe at work, with your family, and on social media. For each one, ask yourself, what am I trying to prove to people when I wear this mask? That I'm smart, that I'm kind, that I'm busy. What part of my true self am I hiding when I wear this mask? My sadness, my ambition, my weirdness. How does my body feel when I've been wearing this mask for too long? The moment you can see the mask, it loses its power over you. You are no longer it. You are the observer of it. This brings us to a crucial question. If all the parts that don't fit the mask are pushed into the basement, what is happening to them down there? In the next part, we are going to open the basement door. We are going to confront the most famous and perhaps the most feared concept in all of Jungian psychology. We are going to meet the shadow. We're going to learn that the things you hide about yourself are actually the secret to your power. I'll see you in part 4.
Part 4. The Golden Shadow. Think of the one person in your life who absolutely gets under your skin. You know the one. Maybe it's a coworker who is incredibly arrogant. Maybe it's a family member who is too loud or too emotional. When you see them, your stomach tightens. You find yourself judging them, dissecting their flaws, and telling anyone who will listen just how wrong they are. Now, I want you to consider a terrifying possibility. The reason you hate that person so much is because they are living out a part of yourself that you have spent your entire life trying to kill. Welcome to part 4. Today, we are opening the door to the basement. We are going to talk about the shadow. In our last session, we talked about the persona, the social mask you wear to be liked and accepted. But to build a mask that is good, kind, and polite, you had to take everything that was bad, selfish, or angry and push it out of sight. You didn't get rid of those parts. You just disowned them. You threw them into the basement of your psyche, locked the door, and pretended they weren't there. But as Carl Jung famously said,
Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. The shadow is not evil. It's simply the parts of yourself that your ego decided were unacceptable. If you were raised in a home where being loud was punished, your natural vitality and exuberance went into the shadow. If you were told that anger is a sin, your ability to set boundaries and stand up for yourself went into the shadow. If you were taught that wanting more is greedy, your ambition and your drive went into the shadow. The shadow is like a twin who was never allowed to come upstairs, and because it has been ignored, hungry, and lonely for decades, it has become a bit of a monster. And here is the catch. You cannot see your own shadow directly. It's behind you. So how does the ocean show you what's in your basement? It uses a trick called projection. When you refuse to see a quality in yourself, you project it onto the world around you. You see it in your neighbors. You see it in politicians. You see it in your partner. If you are someone who is deeply repressed and never allows yourself to be messy, you will be absolutely infuriated by people who are disorganized. If you are someone who has disowned your own power, you will be terrified of anyone who is assertive. Your triggers are actually a map of your own soul. The things that bother you most in others are the keys to your own freedom. Now, why do we call it the golden shadow? Most people think of the shadow as a place of shame and darkness. And yes, it contains your demons, but it also contains your gold. Because when you pushed away your aggression, you also pushed away your courage. When you pushed away your weirdness, you also pushed away your creativity. When you pushed away your selfishness, you also pushed away your self-worth. Dr. Jung realized that the most powerful parts of a human being are usually trapped in the shadow. We are so afraid of being bad that we forget to be whole. Think of the person who is too nice. They are the ultimate people pleaser. They have a perfect persona, but they're exhausted. They have no energy. They feel like a doormat. Why? Because their energy is locked in the basement. Their life force is tied up in the shadow, guarding the door to make sure their anger doesn't get out. To heal, that person doesn't need to think more positive thoughts. They need to go into the basement, find their anger, and bring it back into the light. Not so they can become a bully, but so they can finally say no, so they can finally protect their own time. That is shadow integration. It is the process of taking the raw material of your disowned parts and turning them into gold. So how do you do shadow work? How do you meet the person you don't want to be? It requires a massive amount of radical honesty. You have to be willing to look at the parts of yourself that make you cringe. Here is the 3-step process for integrating the shadow. Step 1, spot the projection. The next time you feel a surge of judgment or intense irritation towards someone else, stop, breathe. Ask yourself, what is the quality in this person that is bothering me? And is there a version of that quality that I have denied in myself? If they are arrogant, have you denied your right to be proud of your work? If they are lazy, have you denied your need for rest? Step 2, dialogue with the shadow. Imagine that disowned part is a person. Sit with it. Ask it, what do you want from me? Why are you here? Usually, the shadow doesn't want to destroy your life. It wants to save it. The anger wants to protect you. The ambition wants to provide for you. The fear wants to keep you safe. Step 3, the small sacrifice. You cannot let the shadow run the house. If you've repressed lust, you don't go out and destroy your marriage. That's acting out, not integrating. Instead, you find a healthy, conscious way to express that energy. You acknowledge it. You give it a seat at the table. You say, I see you, I hear your energy. How can we use this drive to bring more passion into my life, my art, or my connection with my partner? Jung once had a patient who was a very pious religious woman. She was perfect in every way, but she suffered from terrible, violent nightmares. Jung realized she had disowned her animal nature. She was so busy being an angel that she had forgotten she was an animal. He didn't tell her to pray more. He told her to spend more time in nature, to get her hands in the dirt, to eat a steak with her hands, to admit that she had claws and teeth like any other creature. The nightmares stopped. Why? Because the animal in her basement no longer had to scream to be noticed. It was back in the light, contributing its strength to her life. She wasn't less holy, she was more whole. I want you to reconsider the monsters in your life, the things you are ashamed of, the thoughts you think you shouldn't have, the people you can't stand. They are the breadcrumbs leading you back to your own power. For your practice today, I want you to perform a shadow hunt. Recall a time recently when you felt excessive anger or judgment towards someone else, something that felt out of proportion to the event. Write down the 3 words you would use to describe that person's flaw. For example, arrogant, weak, self-centered. Now, write down the positive inverse of those words. For example, confident, sensitive, self-prioritizing. Where in your life have you been missing those positive qualities? How can you start to borrow some of that energy from your shadow today? Don't be afraid of the dark. The dark is just where the treasure is buried. In the next part, we are going to look at the universal blueprints of the human soul. We are going into the world of the archetypes. We are going to discover that your personal struggles are actually part of a story that is as old as the stars. I'll see you in part 5.
Part 5. The Ancient Patterns. Archetypes. Have you ever wondered why children in every corner of the globe, from the skyscrapers of Tokyo to the smallest villages in the Andes, all seem to tell the same stories? Why do we all have a built-in fear of the monster in the dark? Why do we all recognize the wise old man when he shows up in a movie, or the nurturing mother, or the dashing hero? We think we are so modern. We think we are so unique. We believe that our personalities are built entirely from our own experiences, like a blank slate that gets written on by our parents and our environment. But Carl Jung made a discovery that shattered that idea. He realized that you didn't come into this world as a blank slate. You came into this world with a hard drive that was already preloaded with the software of human history. Welcome to Part 5. Today, we're going beyond your personal history and into the collective unconscious. We are going to explore the archetypes. To understand archetypes, you have to understand the difference between your personal unconscious and the collective one. Your personal unconscious is the basement we've been talking about. It contains your memories, your secrets, and your shadow. It's the story of you. But beneath that basement is a deeper level, a bedrock. This is the collective unconscious. It is the part of the mind that is identical in all of us. It is the inherited reservoir of human experience. It's like the blueprint of a human being. Jung called the patterns in this blueprint archetypes. Think of them as emotional instincts. Just as a bird is born knowing how to build a nest, or a spider is born knowing how to spin a web, a human being is born with pre-programmed ways of perceiving the world. We don't learn how to recognize a mother. We're born with the pattern of a mother already inside us. When our biological mother appears, she fills that pattern. These archetypes are the architects of our lives. They are the ancient patterns that direct our behavior, our dreams, and our deepest longings. Let's look at a few of the big ones. The most famous, of course, is the hero. Every culture has a hero's journey. The hero is called to an adventure, faces a series of trials, descends into the underworld, defeats a dragon, and returns with a treasure to save the community. Why is this story everywhere? Because the hero is an archetype of the ego's development. When you are facing a massive crisis, when you feel like your world is ending and you have to find a strength you didn't know you had, you aren't just struggling, you are living out the hero archetype. You are participating in a pattern that has been repeated by millions of human beings for 50,000 years. Knowing this changes everything. It takes the loneliness out of your pain. It reminds you that your struggle has a purpose. The dragon you are fighting, whether it's an addiction, a loss, or a fear, is a necessary part of the pattern.
You are in the descent phase, and the pattern promises that if you stay the course, there is a return. Then there is the wise old man or the crone. This is the archetype of wisdom and guidance. In your dreams, this might show up as a literal old person, or a talking animal, or even a book. In your life, you might project this archetype onto a teacher, a mentor, or a therapist. We look for the master because the pattern of the master is already active inside us, searching for a mirror in the outside world. But here is the danger of archetypes: possession. Sometimes an archetype becomes so powerful that it swallows the individual. Think of the dictator. This is the king archetype gone wrong. The man stops being a human being and becomes a power pattern. He loses his empathy, his humor, and his personal life. He is possessed by the archetype of the tyrant. Or think of the martyr. This is someone who has been swallowed by the archetype of the sufferer. They can't stop sacrificing themselves. They seek out pain because the pattern tells them that pain is their only value. The goal of Jungian work is to relate to the archetypes, not to be consumed by them. You want to have the energy of the hero when you need to face a challenge, but you don't want to think you are the hero 24/7. That leads to inflation, a fancy word for a dangerously oversized ego. You want to be able to access the king to bring order to your life, or the lover to bring passion to your relationships, or the explorer to bring growth to your mind. The archetypes are like a set of powerful tools. If you don't know you have them, they stay in the box. If you let them use you, they break you. But if you learn to use them, you become a master of your own destiny. So why does this matter for your life right now? It matters because it gives you perspective. When you realize that your midlife crisis is just the call to adventure, or that your feeling of being lost is the night sea journey, your life stops feeling like a series of random accidents. It starts to feel like a myth, and a myth is a story with meaning. When you look at your life through the lens of archetypes, you start to see the big patterns. You realize that the ocean we talked about in part 1 is actually trying to pull you into a specific story. It's trying to help you grow into your full potential. For your practice today, I want you to perform an archetypal audit. Look at your current life situation, the biggest challenge or the biggest theme you are facing right now. Ask yourself, if my life were a movie, which character am I playing right now? Are you the orphan, feeling abandoned and alone? Are you the warrior, fighting a battle every day? Are you the caregiver, losing yourself in the needs of others? Are you the seeker, looking for a truth you can't yet name? Don't judge the role, just name it. Once you name the archetype, you can look at the wisdom of that pattern. What does the seeker need to do next? What is the warrior supposed to learn from this battle? You are no longer a victim of circumstances. You are a character in a timeless drama. In the next part, we are going to look at the most intimate archetypes of all. We are going to explore the internal mirror. We are going to meet the Anima and the Animus. We are going to discover why you are attracted to who you are attracted to, and how your inner opposite is the key to your creative soul. I'll see you in part 6.
Part 6. The Inner Mirror. Anima and Animus. Have you ever met someone for the first time and felt a jolt of recognition so strong it took your breath away? You didn't know them. You didn't know their story, their character, or their values. But in an instant, you felt as though you had found a missing piece of yourself. You were smitten. You were obsessed. You felt that finally your life had found its center in this other person. We call it love at first sight, but Carl Jung would call it something else. He would call it a projection. He would tell you that you haven't actually fallen in love with the person standing in front of you. You have fallen in love with a hidden part of your own soul that you have projected onto them, like a movie onto a screen. Welcome to part 6. Today, we meet the inner mirror, the Anima and Animus. Jung observed a fascinating biological and psychological truth. We are born as one sex, male or female. But psychologically, none of us is purely one thing.
Every man carries within him a feminine soul image, which Jung called the Anima. Every woman carries within her a masculine soul image, which he called the Animus. Now, don't get caught up in modern definitions of gender roles. Jung wasn't talking about how you dress or who you're attracted to in a physical sense. He was talking about the great balancing act of the psyche. If the ego is the boat we talked about in part 1, then the anima or animus is the bridge to the ocean. They are the mediators between your conscious mind and the vast, mysterious depths of the collective unconscious. But because most of us are never taught to look inward, we don't realize the bridge exists. So what does the psyche do? It looks for the bridge in the outside world. This is the secret behind our most intense romantic entanglements. A man who is very logical, stoic, and rational has a feminine anima that is emotional, intuitive, and creative. Because he has neglected those qualities in himself, he will be irresistibly drawn to a woman who embodies them. He feels that she completes him. Similarly, a woman who is very nurturing, relational, and soft has a masculine animus that is assertive, analytical, and focused. She will often find herself captivated by a man who is a man of action. In the beginning, it feels like magic, but eventually, the projection begins to fray. You realize that the perfect goddess you fell in love with is actually a human being with her own flaws, or the heroic protector you adored is just a man with his own insecurities. The mirage fades, and this is where most relationships fail. People think they fell out of love, but Jung would say, no, you didn't fall out of love. You just stopped looking at your own reflection and started seeing the real person, and that is where real love actually begins. If you can't see the real person because you're too busy looking for your soulmate, you are living in a dream, and that dream will eventually turn into a nightmare of resentment and misunderstanding. So, if the anima and animus aren't just for romance, what are they for? Jung called them the psychopomps, the guides of the soul. When a man connects with his anima, he gains access to his intuition, his capacity for deep relationship, and his creative inspiration. He becomes whole. He no longer needs a woman to provide his emotional life for him. He has his own. This allows him to love a woman for who she is, rather than what she does for his ego. When a woman connects with her animus, she gains access to her inner strength, her logical clarity, and her ability to manifest her will in the world. She no longer needs a man to provide her direction or protection. She has her own. This allows her to love a man as a partner, not a crutch. This is the goal of individuation, to find the other within yourself so that you can be truly present with the other in your life. But be warned, when these forces are ignored, they become toxic. And ignored anima in a man doesn't just go away, it turns into moodiness. He becomes touchy, overly sensitive, or prone to fits of feeling that he can't control. He becomes a victim of his own hidden emotions. And ignored animus in a woman turns into opinionatedness. She becomes rigid, argumentative, and know-it-all. She finds herself trapped in cold logic that cuts people off rather than connecting with them. If your moods or your opinions are driving the boat, the mirror has taken control. So, how do we begin the dialogue with our inner opposite? How do we stop the projection? It starts with the double awareness. The next time you are overwhelmingly attracted to someone, or interestingly, overwhelmingly repelled by someone of the opposite sex, ask yourself, what quality do they have that I'm missing? What part of my soul am I asking them to carry for me? If you find yourself obsessed with a partner's freedom, it's likely because you have imprisoned your own. If you are frustrated by a partner's lack of logic, it's likely because you are over-identifying with your own rationality and neglecting your heart. The person in front of you is a mirror. Use them to see what's behind your own eyes. Jung suggested that we should literally talk to these parts of ourselves. In his own life, he would have long conversations with his anima. He would ask her for her perspective on his work. He would listen for her voice, that quiet, intuitive nudge that felt different from his usual thinking voice. You are not a single, solid block of stone. You are a relationship. You are a conversation between the you know and the other you are becoming. For your practice today, I want you to perform a soul image visualization. Find a quiet space, close your eyes, imagine you are walking through a beautiful, misty forest. Out of the mist, a figure approaches. This is your anima, if you are a man, or your animus, if you are a woman. What do they look like? Are they old or young? Are they kind or fierce? What is the one thing they want to tell you about the way you are living your life right now? Don't try to think of an answer. Let the image speak. Whatever comes up, even if it's just a feeling, write it down in your symbol log. You are no longer looking for your soul in another person's eyes. You are starting to see it in your own. In the next part, we are going to find the center of the entire map. We are going to move from the ego to the self. We're going to discover the difference between what I want and what the universe wants through me. I'll see you in Part 7, The True Center.
Part 7, The True Center, the self versus the ego. Have you ever gotten exactly what you wanted, only to find that it didn't feel the way you thought it would? You got the promotion, you bought the house, you married the person, you reached the goal you've been chasing for a decade, and for a few days, it was glorious. But then, the quiet returned. That nagging feeling in the back of your mind that asks, is this it? Is this all there is? Most of us spend our entire lives trying to make the small I happy. We focus on the ego, the part of us that wants a bigger bank account, a better reputation, and a life that looks good on paper. But Carl Jung made a discovery that changes the way you look at your own ambition. He realized that the ego is not the center of your being. The ego is just the manager of the office. There is a director upstairs who has a much bigger plan. Welcome to Part 7. Today, we meet the true center, the self. To understand the difference between the ego and the self, I want you to imagine a solar system. For most of your life, you have lived as if the Earth, the ego, is the center of the universe. You believe that everything should revolve around your needs, your fears, and your plans. You spend all your energy trying to control the orbits of the people and events around you. But eventually, the math stops working. Life becomes too heavy. You realize you don't have enough gravity to hold it all together. This is what we call a midlife crisis, but to Jung, it is actually an ego self-displacement. It is the moment you realize that the sun is the center, not the earth. The self is the totality of your psyche. It is the conscious and the unconscious combined. It is the greater I that has been watching over you since the moment you were born. It is the blueprint of your destiny. If the ego is the part of you that asks, what do I want? The self is the part of you that asks, what does life want through me? In Man and His Symbols, Jung points to a specific image that has appeared in every culture since the dawn of time, the mandala. Whether it's a rose window in a cathedral, a sand painting in Tibet, or a stone circle in the desert, the pattern is always the same, a circle with a center. Jung noticed that when his patients were going through intense periods of psychological chaos, when their lives were falling apart, they would often start drawing these circular patterns in their notebooks. They didn't know why. He realized that the psyche was trying to find its center again. When your ego is overwhelmed by the world, the self sends up these symbols to remind you that there is an organizing principle inside you that cannot be broken. There is a part of you that is already whole, already wise, and already at peace. Your job isn't to create this center. Your job is to align with it. This shift from the ego to the self is the most difficult thing a human being can do. Why? Because the ego doesn't want to give up control. The ego wants to be the king. It wants to believe it is the author of its life. To align with the self, you have to admit that you don't always know what's best for you. You have to admit that your failures might actually be the self trying to move you in a better direction.
You have to admit that the tragedy that broke your heart might have been the only way to crack the ego open so the soul could breathe. Jungian psychology is unique because it isn't just about fixing symptoms, it's about vocation. It's about discovering the calling that the self has for your life. When you live from the ego, you are driven by shoulds. I should be successful. I should be liked. I should be perfect. When you live from the self, you are driven by necessity. I must do this work. I must speak this truth. I must follow this path even if no one understands it. One leads to exhaustion. The other leads to meaning. So how do you start to listen to the self? How do you distinguish its voice from the noise of the ego? The ego is loud, fast, and anxious. It speaks in what-ifs. The self is quiet, slow, and certain. It speaks in I am. The self speaks to you through the meaningful coincidences we'll talk about later. It speaks through the symbols in your dreams. And most of all, it speaks through your resistance. If you are forcing yourself to stay in a career or a relationship that is perfect on paper, but you feel a deep, soul-crushing boredom, that is the self saying, this is not it. The self would rather you be a failed ego that is authentic than a successful ego that is a lie. Because the self doesn't care about your social status, it cares about your individuation. It cares about you becoming the unique, unrepeatable human being you were designed to be. I want to share a thought from a colleague of Jung's. Marie-Louise Franz once said that the self is like an inner friend who knows you better than you know yourself. Sometimes this friend is kind, sometimes this friend is harsh, but this friend is always looking out for your wholeness. If you have spent your life trying to be good, the self might send you a crisis that forces you to be real. If you have spent your life being weak, the self might push you into a corner where you have to find your strength. The self doesn't want you to be a saint, it wants you to be a person. For your practice today, I want you to perform a center check. Think of a major decision you're facing right now. First, listen to the ego's voice. What is it afraid of? What does it want to gain? For example, I'm afraid people will judge me if I quit. Now, take a deep breath. Imagine you're standing at the center of a great mandala. Ask the inner friend, the self, the same question. What is the next step for my wholeness? Don't look for a logical answer. Look for a sensation. Does the thought of a certain path make you feel heavy or light? Does it feel like expanding or shrinking? The self speaks in the language of the body and the soul. In the next part, we're going to look at the crisis that often forces this shift. We're going to explore the hero's descent. We're going to look at why your current struggles are actually an initiation and how to find the treasure that is guarded by the dragon of your fears. I'll see you in Part 8.
Part 8. The Hero's Descent. You've been here before. Maybe you're here right now. It's that moment when the floor falls out from under you. The relationship ends, the career path hits a dead end, the health scare happens. Or maybe it's not an external event at all. Maybe it's just that one morning you wake up and realize you can't keep pretending anymore. The life you've built feels like a suit that's 3 sizes too small. We call these moments crises. We call them breakdowns. We treat them like mistakes that need to be fixed as quickly as possible so we can get back to normal. But Carl Jung would look at your crumbling life and say, "Congratulations, the hero has received the call." Welcome to Part 8. Today, we are talking about the most misunderstood phase of the human experience, the hero's descent. We've talked about the archetypes, those ancient patterns in the collective unconscious, and of all of them, the hero is the one we identify with most. But we usually only like the winning part of the hero's story. We like the part where he slays the dragon and wears the crown. But Jung realized that you cannot have the crown without the descent. You cannot have the ascent to the self without first going into the abyss. In every myth, in every legend, from every culture on Earth, the hero has to leave the ordinary world. They have to leave the safety of the persona, the mask and the roles they know, and travel into a special world.
Jung called this the night sea journey. It is the moment the sun goes down and you are swallowed by the ocean. It is the belly of the whale. It is the dark night of the soul. Why does this have to happen? Why can't we just grow linearly, getting better and better every day? Because the ego, the small I, is stubborn. It wants to stay in the light. It wants to keep its mask on. It will never willingly go into the basement to find the shadow or the anima. It has to be pushed. The crisis is the push. It is the psyche's way of saying the current version of you is too small. To grow, the ego must die so that the self can be born. Think about a seed. To a seed, being buried in the cold, dark earth probably feels like the end of the world. It's being crushed, it's being forgotten, it is literally falling apart. But from the perspective of the forest, the seed isn't dying, it is unfolding. The hard shell has to break so that the life inside can reach the sun. Your crisis is the breaking of the shell. When your life falls apart, it's often because the persona you've been wearing has become a cage. You've been trying to be the good child or the success or the provider for so long that you've neglected the rest of your soul. The descent is the process of going back down into the basement to retrieve what you lost. In the myths, the hero goes into the cave to find a treasure, but the treasure is always guarded by a dragon. Jung's profound insight was that the dragon and the treasure are the same thing. The dragon is your fear. It is your shadow. It is the part of yourself you've disowned. As long as you run from it, it remains a monster that haunts your dreams and sabotages your life. But the moment you turn around, the moment you descend into the cave and face it, the dragon transforms. The fire of the dragon becomes the light of your new consciousness. So how do you handle a descent without drowning? How do you move through the night sea journey without losing your mind? Jung suggests a shift in perspective. You have to stop asking, why is this happening to me, and start asking, what is this asking of me? This is the shift from victim to hero. A victim sees a crisis as a random act of cruelty from the universe. They try to numb the pain. They try to run back to the old, ordinary world that no longer exists. They get stuck in the dark. A hero sees a crisis as an initiation. An initiation is a ritual that marks the transition from one stage of life to another. It is meant to be difficult. It is meant to be scary. In ancient tribes, the young men were taken into the forest and left alone in the dark. They had to face their fear to become adults. If you are in the dark right now, you are being initiated. Your ocean has pulled you off course because the old course was leading to a dead end. You are being forced to find a new compass. You are being forced to find the self we talked about in part 7. The abyss feels like emptiness, but Jung called it the pleroma, the fullness. It is full of the potential versions of you that you haven't met yet. I want to tell you about a patient Jung once had. This man was a brilliant scientist who had lost his ability to work. He was paralyzed by depression. He felt like he was sinking. Jung didn't try to cheer him up. He told the man to describe the sinking. The man said it felt like he was falling into a black pit. Jung told him to go into the pit. Don't fight it. Describe what you see at the bottom. The man descended through his imagination. At the bottom of the pit, he didn't find death. He found a small, neglected garden with a single fountain. That fountain was his life force. He had been so busy being a great scientist, the persona, that he had neglected his inner garden, his emotional and creative life. The depression wasn't an illness, it was a downward pull by the self trying to get him to water his garden. Once he accepted the descent, once he agreed to be a gardener as well as a scientist, the depression lifted. He had found the treasure. So what is the dragon guarding in your cave? If you are facing a crisis of meaninglessness, perhaps the treasure is a creative spark you smothered 20 years ago. If you are facing a crisis of loneliness, perhaps the treasure is the Anima or Animus waiting to be friended. If you are facing a crisis of failure, perhaps the treasure is the realization that your ego's goals were never yours to begin with. For your practice today, I want you to perform a reframing the descent. Think of the problem that is currently causing you the most stress or pain. Describe the dragon. What is the scariest part of this situation? For example, I'm afraid I'll be broke and alone. Now, look for the treasure. If this situation were an initiation into a stronger version of you, what is the one quality it is forcing you to develop? For example, it is forcing me to find my own worth independent of my job. Take one small heroic action today that honors that quality. Don't wait for the storm to pass. Learn to navigate the night sea. The gift is in the darkness. In the next part, we are going to look at the signs that the ocean sends us during the journey. We are going to explore the mysterious world of synchronicity. We're going to look at those meaningful coincidences that tell you that the universe is actually listening. I'll see you in part 9.
Part 9. The Web of Meaning. Synchronicity. Have you ever been thinking of an old friend? Someone you haven't spoken to in years, and 5 minutes later your phone buzzes with a text from them? Or maybe you were struggling with a massive decision, feeling completely lost, and you happen to glance at a billboard or overhear a fragment of a stranger's conversation, and it contained the exact answer you needed. Most people call these coincidences. They shrug them off as random accidents in a chaotic world. They say, "What are the odds?" And then they move on with their day. But Carl Jung would stop you. He would tell you that there is no such thing as a random accident when it carries that much weight. He would tell you that you've just experienced a synchronicity. Welcome to Part 9. Today, we are exploring the bridge between the invisible ocean of your mind and the physical reality of the world around you. We're going to talk about the web of meaning. Jung coined the term synchronicity to describe what he called an acausal connecting principle. That's a heavy phrase, but it means something beautiful. It's when an internal psychological event, like a dream, a thought, or a feeling, matches up perfectly with an external physical event, and there is no logical cause and effect reason for it to happen. The most famous example is Jung's golden scarab. He was treating a patient who was psychologically stuck. She was a highly intellectual woman, very rational, very ego-driven. She didn't believe in the unconscious. She thought she could think her way out of any problem. One day, she was telling Jung about a dream she'd had the night before, a dream about being given a piece of expensive jewelry, a golden scarab beetle. At that exact moment, Jung heard a gentle tapping on the window pane behind him. He opened the window and caught a large greenish gold beetle. It was a scarabaeid beetle, the closest thing to a golden scarab you can find in that climate. He held it out to her and said, "Here is your scarab." That moment broke her. It shattered her rigid, rational armor, because there was no logical way for that beetle to show up at the exact second she mentioned it in her dream. It was as if the universe had reached out and tapped her on the shoulder, saying, "I am listening. You are not alone." Jung realized that synchronicity is the universe's way of validating the soul. When you are on the path of individuation, when you are doing the hard work of meeting your shadow and following yourself, the universe starts to provide signposts. It's as if the invisible ocean we talked about in Part 1 is so powerful that its ripples actually affect the physical world. Think of your life as a movie. Most of the time, you're just an actor following a script. But a synchronicity is like the director stepping out from behind the camera to hand you a prop you forgot you needed. It's a moment where the meaning of your life becomes visible in the matter of the world. Now, why does this matter for you? It matters because we live in a culture that has stripped the world of its magic. We've been told the universe is a dead machine. We've been told that we are isolated islands of consciousness in a cold, dark void. That belief creates a profound sense of existential loneliness. It makes us feel like our struggles don't matter and our growth is invisible. Synchronicity is the cure for that loneliness. It tells you that you are part of a web of meaning.
It suggests that the self, that inner architect we met in Part 7, is not just inside your head. It is part of the Anima Mundi, the soul of the world. When you experience a meaningful coincidence, it is a signal that you are in alignment. It's the universe saying, yes, this path, this thought, this person, you are where you are meant to be. Now, how do you invite more synchronicity into your life? You can't force it. You can't command the universe to send you a beetle. Synchronicity is a gift from the depths, but you can make yourself more available for the gift. You do this by developing symbolic sight. Most people look at the world and see things. You see a bird, you see a car, you see a clock, but when you are living a Jungian life, you look at the world and see messages. You start to ask, why did that specific bird show up when I was thinking about my mother? Why did that specific song play when I was feeling defeated? You don't have to be superstitious. You don't have to believe the bird is a ghost. You just have to acknowledge the impact. If the bird's appearance gave you a feeling of peace or a new insight, then the meaning is real. And in the world of the soul, meaning is more important than fact. Jung warned that when we ignore these signs, when we live entirely in our boat and ignore the ripples, we become brittle. We lose our sense of wonder. We become hollow men again. But when you start to look for the web, your life becomes an adventure. You realize that every day is a dialogue between you and the great mystery. You start to pay attention to your hunches. You start to trust your gut. You realize that the ocean is constantly trying to help you navigate, if only you'd look at the stars. I want to tell you about a concept Jung explored called Unus Mundus, the one world. He believed at the deepest level, mind and matter are the same thing. They are just two different sides of the same coin. This is why your internal growth can be reflected in your external circumstances. If you are facing your shadow with courage, you might find that your external enemies suddenly disappear or transform. If you are finally honoring your creative anima, you might find that the resources you need suddenly appear out of nowhere. The web is real, and you are at the center of it. For your practice today, I want you to perform a synchronicity hunt. Recall the last meaningful coincidence that happened to you. It might have been years ago, or it might have been this morning. Describe the inner state. What were you thinking or feeling right before it happened? For example, I was feeling hopeless about my finances. Describe the outer event. What was the coincidence? For example, I found a $20 bill in an old coat, and then a client I hadn't heard from in a year called. Find the bridge. What was the message the universe was sending you in that moment? For example, trust the process. You are provided for. Start writing these down in your symbol log. You'll be amazed to see that once you start acknowledging the signs start to show up more often. The universe is answering you. You just have to listen. In our final part, we are going to tie everything together. We are going to explore the ultimate goal of the Jungian journey. We're going to go into the world of individuation. We're going to look at what it looks like to be a whole human and how to live the rest of your life as a work of art. I'll see you in Part 10, The Whole Human.
Part 10, The Whole Human, Individuation. We have reached the end of the map, but as any traveler knows, the end of the map is usually where the real journey begins. Over the last 9 sessions, we have dissected your soul. We've looked at the masks you wear, the demons you hide, and the mysterious other that lives inside your heart. We've looked at the signs in the stars and the symbols in your dreams. Now, the question is, what does it all mean for the person you are going to be tomorrow? The answer lies in one of the most powerful and beautiful concepts in all of human history. Carl Jung called it individuation. Welcome to the final part of our masterclass, The Whole Human. The goal is not perfection. There is a fundamental misunderstanding in our culture about what it means to grow. We think growth means getting rid of our flaws. We think it means becoming a saint or a success or a perfect version of ourselves.
But Jung had a very different view. He said, "I'd rather be whole than good." Individuation is not the process of becoming perfect, it is the process of becoming complete. It is the act of gathering all those scattered pieces of yourself, the parts you were ashamed of, the parts you projected onto others, the parts you didn't know you had, and bringing them all home to the center. An individuated person isn't someone who never gets angry or never feels afraid. They are someone who knows their anger and understands their fear. They don't have a basement anymore. They have a home with the lights turned on in every room. The tree of life. Jung often used the metaphor of a tree to describe the individuated human being. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. If you want to have a mind that is capable of great creativity, wisdom, and light, you must also have roots that are deep enough to touch the darkness of human nature. You must acknowledge your capacity for destruction so that you can consciously choose the path of creation. When you are individuated, you are no longer a leaf blown around by the winds of the collective unconscious. You are the tree. You are grounded in your own truth. You are rooted in the self. The religious attitude to life. In Man and His Symbols, Jung talked about the religious attitude. He wasn't talking about joining a church or following a dogma. He was talking about a reverence for the mystery of life. An individuated person lives with an open dialogue between the boat and the ocean. They pay attention to their dreams. They look for synchronicity. They treat their moods and their triggers with curiosity rather than judgment. They realize that life is an opus, a great work of art that is being created through them. You are no longer the victim of your biography. You are the co-creator of your destiny. You understand that every crisis was an initiation, and every shadow was a hidden treasure. The gift to the collective. You might think that individuation sounds like a selfish process. Why spend all this time looking at my own soul? Shouldn't I be out helping the world? But Jung's answer was profound. The greatest gift you can give to the world is your own wholeness. A person who has faced their own shadow will never be a fanatic. They will never be a tyrant. They will never be someone who projects their hate onto a neighbor or a group of people. The world is filled with fragmented people who are trying to fix the world because they refuse to fix themselves. But a whole person brings a unique kind of peace to the room. They don't need to be right. They don't need to be superior. They just need to be real. By becoming who you truly are, unrepeatable, complex, and authentic, you give everyone else permission to do the same. The final practice, the ongoing conversation. So, how do you live a Jungian life once this masterclass is over? Individuation is not a destination you reach and then retire. It is a process. It is a lifelong conversation. I want to leave you with 3 final tools for your journey. Maintain the symbol log. Keep recording your dreams and your synchronicities. The ocean will keep speaking as long as you keep listening. Watch the projections. Whenever you feel a surge of intense emotion towards someone else, remember the mirror. Ask yourself, what part of me is standing over there? Trust the self. When you feel lost, stop looking at the map the world gave you. Quiet the ego. Go to the center of your own mandala and ask, what is the next step for my wholeness? A final word from Dr. Jung. Carl Jung ended his life's work with a simple but haunting observation. He said that most people die without ever truly meeting themselves. They live as a collection of social masks and inherited fears. But you have chosen a different path. You have chosen to look into the mirror. You have chosen to descend into the cave. You have chosen to navigate the night sea. The world doesn't need more perfect people. The world is dying for whole people. Go forth. Be messy, be complex, be dark, and be light. But above all, be yourself. The invisible ocean is deep, and the journey is long, but you have the map now. And more importantly, you have the stars. Thank you for walking this path with me.